I'm Sarah Chen, and last Thanksgiving, my family called me a failure at dinner while my sister's boss sat right across from me. What they didn't know was that my sister's boss actually works for me. The woman they were praising for giving Jessica such a great opportunity was someone I hired 6 months ago to run one of my client accounts. But that wasn't even the most shocking part of the evening. The real revelation came when my father started lecturing me about responsibility and success, completely unaware that the company he'd been bragging about landing as their biggest client was mine. Let me tell you how a family dinner turned into the most uncomfortable business meeting of my life, and how keeping my success secret almost destroyed the relationships that mattered most. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The smell of turkey and my mother's famous sage stuffing filled the Chen family home as I pulled into the familiar driveway on Maple Creek Drive. The two-story colonial looked exactly as it had throughout my childhood, with its white shutters and perfectly manicured lawn that my father obsessed over every weekend. I sat in my Honda Civic for a moment, steeling myself for what had become an increasingly uncomfortable annual tradition. Through the bay window, I could see my family moving around the dining room, setting the table with the good china that only came out for holidays and special occasions. My phone buzzed with a text from Robert, my business partner and CFO. Board meeting moved to Monday. Enjoy your family time and try not to let them get under your skin. I smiled at his message, knowing he understood the complicated relationship I had with my family's perception of my life. Robert was one of only 3 people who knew the full truth about what I'd been doing for the past 2 years, while my family assumed I was struggling to find my place in the world. I grabbed the bottle of wine I'd brought, and the small gift bag containing my contributions to our traditional gift exchange. As I walked up the stone pathway, I could hear laughter from inside, the kind of easy family joy that I'd somehow become separate from over the years. My mother's voice carried through the door as she directed traffic in the kitchen, orchestrating the final preparations for our Thanksgiving feast. "Sarah's here," my younger brother Michael called out as I rang the doorbell, a formality that had developed since I'd moved out 3 years ago. The door swung open to reveal Michael's grinning face, his University of Texas hoodie wrinkled from what had probably been an afternoon nap. At 22, he still had the easy confidence of someone whose biggest worry was his upcoming finals in engineering. "Hey Mike," I said, accepting his enthusiastic hug. "How's senior year treating you?" "Can't complain," he replied, taking the wine from my hands. "Dad's been asking when you were going to get here. Mom's been cooking since 6 this morning and stress cleaning everything inside." I followed him into the house, breathing in the familiar combination of pine sol and holiday spices that defined my childhood memories of this place. The hardwood floors gleamed under the chandelier my parents had installed during their renovation phase 5 years ago, back when my father's insurance company was having its best year on record. Family photos lined the hallway leading to the kitchen, a chronological display of birthday parties, graduations, and family vacations that told the story of our lives in carefully framed moments. "Sarah, sweetheart." My mother emerged from the kitchen, her apron dusted with flour and her face flushed from the heat of cooking. Linda Chen had always been the emotional center of our family, the one who remembered birthdays and orchestrated gatherings, and worried about everyone's happiness with the intensity of someone whose own fulfillment came from taking care of others. She embraced me warmly, holding on just a moment longer than usual in that way that suggested she'd been worried about me. "The house smells incredible, Mom," I said, meaning it sincerely. Whatever complications existed in our family dynamics, my mother's cooking remained a source of pure comfort and connection to happier times. "I made all your favorites," she said, beaming with the pride of someone whose love language was food preparation. "And I invited Elena Martinez from next door. You remember Elena? She's been asking about you." I nodded, remembering Elena as the friendly neighbor who had watched our house during family vacations, and always seemed to know everyone's business with an uncanny accuracy that suggested she paid very close attention to the comings and goings of the entire neighborhood. "Where's Dad?" I asked, noticing his absence from the usual greeting committee. "Study," Michael replied, rolling his eyes slightly. "Conference call with some client on Thanksgiving Day. Mom's been giving him grief about it all morning." This didn't surprise me. David Chen had built Meridian Insurance Group from a small local agency into a regional player through sheer determination and an inability to completely disconnect from work even on holiday. His dedication to his business had always been both admirable and somewhat exhausting for the rest of us, who sometimes felt like we were competing with insurance policies for his attention. Sarah, my sister Jessica, appeared from the living room, her blonde highlights catching the light as she moved. At 25, Jessica had inherited our mother's social ease and our father's ambition, channeling both into a marketing career that she approached with infectious enthusiasm. She looked polished and professional even in casual holiday attire, her makeup perfectly applied and her outfit clearly chosen to photograph well for the inevitable social media posts that would document our family gathering. "Jess," I said, accepting her hug and noticing the subtle scent of expensive perfume that suggested her job at brand-forward marketing was paying better than I'd realized. "You look great. How's work going?" "Amazing," she said, her eyes lighting up with genuine excitement. "Actually, I can't wait for you to meet my boss. Amanda's joining us for dinner. She's incredible and she's been such a mentor to me. I think you two would really get along." My stomach dropped slightly as I processed this information. Amanda Rodriguez, my director of client relations, would be sitting at my family's Thanksgiving table in approximately 2 hours. Amanda, who had been sending me daily reports about Jessica's performance on the brand forward account. Amanda, who had no idea that the sister Jessica talked about constantly was actually her CEO. "That's great," I managed, hoping my voice sounded more enthusiastic than I felt. "I'm looking forward to meeting her." Jessica continued chattering about Amanda's accomplishments and leadership style, praising her strategic thinking and mentorship approach with the kind of admiration that made me simultaneously proud of my hiring decisions and terrified about the evening ahead. I had specifically chosen Amanda for the brand forward account because of her ability to develop strong relationships with clients while maintaining clear professional boundaries. What I hadn't anticipated was that her relationship with Jessica would become personal enough to warrant holiday dinner invitations. "Sarah Chen, is that really you?" Elena Martinez appeared in the doorway, having let herself in through the back door with the casual familiarity of someone who had been part of our family's extended circle for over a decade. Elena had aged gracefully into her 50s, her silver hair styled in a way that suggested she kept up with current trends while maintaining an air of sophisticated maturity. "Elena, so good to see you," I said, accepting her warm embrace. Elena had always been kind to me, though I suspected she shared my parents' concern about my apparent lack of direction in recent years. "I was just telling your mother how proud she must be of Jessica's new position," Elena continued, her voice carrying the subtle emphasis that indicated this was a topic she'd been discussing extensively. "And I'm sure something wonderful is just around the corner for you too, dear. These things have a way of working out when we least expect them." The well-meaning condescension in her tone was familiar and not entirely unwelcome. Elena genuinely cared about our family's well-being, and her concern came from a place of authentic affection rather than judgment. Still, the implication that I needed things to work out stung slightly, even though I understood why she would think that based on the limited information my family shared about my life. "Where's this famous boss of yours?" my mother asked Jessica as we moved toward the living room. "I want to make sure everything's perfect when she arrives. She should be here any minute," Jessica replied, checking her phone. "She's driving in from her place downtown. She lives in one of those new loft buildings near the river. I've never been inside, but she says the view is incredible." I knew exactly which building Jessica was referring to because I lived 3 floors above Amanda in the same complex. We'd had several awkward encounters in the lobby and elevator, during which Amanda had been professionally polite while clearly wondering why her CEO lived in the same building as a junior marketing employee's sister who appeared to be unemployed. I'd managed to avoid any extended conversations by claiming I was visiting friends or running errands, but the situation had been growing increasingly uncomfortable as Amanda seemed to be spending more time at the building. My father emerged from his study as we settled in the living room, his phone finally silent and his attention shifting to family mode with the deliberate focus of someone accustomed to compartmentalizing different aspects of his life. David Chen commanded attention without trying, his presence filling rooms with the quiet authority of someone who had spent decades making important decisions and bearing responsibility for other people's financial security. "Sarah," he said, nodding in acknowledgement before settling into his leather recliner with the satisfied air of someone whose workday had concluded successfully. How have you been? Still figuring things out? The question, delivered without malice but with a subtle edge of concern, captured perfectly the dynamic that had developed between us over the past 2 years. My father genuinely wanted me to succeed and find happiness, but his definition of success remained firmly rooted in traditional markers of achievement that he could understand and explain to his friends and colleagues. I'm doing well, Dad, I replied, settling onto the couch beside Jessica. Keeping busy with various projects. Projects, he repeated thoughtfully, as if testing the word's meaning. Any of these projects developing into actual employment opportunities? Michael shot me a sympathetic look from his position on the floor where he was scrolling through his phone. He'd heard variations of this conversation numerous times over the past few years, and had developed a protective instinct toward me that I appreciated even when I couldn't explain why his protection was unnecessary. Not everyone needs to follow the same timeline, David. Of course not, my father agreed, though his tone suggested he remained unconvinced about the wisdom of my particular timeline. I just worry about long-term planning, benefits, retirement savings, career progression. These things become more important as you get older. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang, saving me from another round of well-intentioned career counseling. Jessica jumped up immediately, smoothing her outfit and checking her reflection in the hallway mirror before opening the door. Amanda, you made it. Jessica's voice carried the enthusiasm of someone introducing their hero to their family. Everyone, this is Amanda Rodriguez, my incredible boss. Amanda stepped into our foyer looking exactly as poised and professional as she did in our Monday morning strategy meeting. She wore a burgundy dress that struck the perfect balance between holiday festive and business appropriate, her dark hair styled in a way that conveyed competence without severity. In her hands were a bottle of wine and a small potted plant, gifts chosen with the thoughtfulness of someone who understood the importance of making good impressions. Miss Chan, thank you so much for including me in your family celebration, Amanda said, addressing my mother with the warm professionalism that had made her such an asset to our company. Jessica talks about your family constantly, and I feel like I already know all of you. My mother beamed under Amanda's attention, clearly charmed by her gracious manner and articulate appreciation. Please call me Linda. Any friend of Jessica's is family, and thank you for these beautiful gifts. Dad, Mike, this is Amanda. Jessica continued the introductions with obvious pride. Amanda, my father David and my brother Michael. I watched Amanda greet my family members with the perfect blend of respect and friendliness, noting how she adapted her communication style slightly for preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Each person while maintaining her authentic warmth. These were exactly the qualities that had made me confident in promoting her to client relations director, and seeing them in action in my family's living room created a surreal sense of professional pride, mixed with personal anxiety. And this is my sister Sarah, Jessica said finally, her voice carrying a subtle note of apology that I'd heard before when she introduced me to her professional contacts. Sarah is between opportunities right now, exploring different options. Amanda turned toward me with the polite smile she'd been wearing throughout the introductions, but I saw the moment of recognition flicker across her features. Her expression shifted almost imperceptibly, confusion replacing professional courtesy as she processed seeing me in this context. Sarah, she said carefully, extending her hand for a handshake that felt loaded with unspoken questions. It's nice to meet you. Likewise, I replied, matching her careful tone while internally calculating how to navigate the next several hours without revealing the truth about our actual relationship. Amanda's been such an incredible mentor to Jessica, my mother said, settling back into hostess mode as she guided everyone toward the dining room. Jessica was just telling us about the new client project you assigned her. She's learned so much working with you. Jessica's been fantastic, Amanda replied, her professional instincts taking over even as I noticed her glancing at me with increasing curiosity. She has real talent for strategic thinking and client relationship building. The Brand Forward project has been one of our most successful launches this quarter. I felt a flush of pride hearing Amanda praise Jessica's work, knowing that both women deserved credit for the project's success. Jessica had thrown herself into the assignment with characteristic determination, and Amanda had provided exactly the kind of guidance and support that helped talented employees excel. What neither of them knew was that I'd been receiving detailed progress reports throughout the project's development, and had been quietly proud of both their contributions. "What kind of company do you work for?" Alina asked as we took our seats around the dining table, which my mother had set with her usual attention to detail. Fresh flowers served as centerpieces, and the good silverware gleamed under the chandelier's warm light. "We're a technology consulting firm," Amanda explained, accepting the glass of wine my father offered. "We help businesses optimize their operations through strategic technology implementation and process improvement. It's challenging work, but incredibly rewarding when you see the positive impact on our clients' success." My father's expression brightened with genuine interest. Technology consulting represented exactly the kind of modern, growth-oriented business that appealed to his entrepreneurial instinct. "That sounds like a field with tremendous potential. Are you finding good opportunities in the Austin market?" "Absolutely," Amanda replied with enthusiasm. "Austin's business community is incredibly dynamic. We've been fortunate to work with some amazing local companies, and the demand for our services continues to grow." "What's the name of your company?" Alina asked, her curiosity clearly piqued by Amanda's description of the business. "Tech Flow Solutions," Amanda answered, and I watched my father's expression change dramatically. The wineglass in his hand paused halfway to his lips, and his eyes sharpened with sudden attention. "Tech Flow Solutions. You work for Tech Flow Solutions?" "Yes," Amanda confirmed, looking slightly puzzled by his reaction. "Do you know the company?" My father set down his wineglass with deliberate care, his business instincts clearly engaged. "Tech Flow is our insurance company's largest new client. We just signed a comprehensive policy package with them 3 months ago. Significant account, very impressive operation." The irony of the situation hit me like a physical blow. My father had been bragging to anyone who would listen about landing Tech Flow Solutions as a client, describing it as a major coup for Meridian Insurance Group. He'd mentioned the account numerous times during our recent phone conversations, though he'd never connected the company name to my vague references to consulting work. "What a small world," Amanda said with genuine surprise. "Tech Flow has been expanding rapidly, so I'm sure they needed comprehensive insurance coverage." "Indeed," my father replied, warming to the topic with the enthusiasm he reserved for successful business discussions. "The CEO impressed me enormously during our initial meeting. Very sharp, strategic thinker. Young woman, which you don't always see in executive leadership, but she knew exactly what she needed and made decisions quickly. Sarah Chen, I believe her name was." The silence that followed his words felt deafening. I watched Amanda's face transform as she processed what my father had just said, realization dawning in her expression like sunrise breaking over a landscape. Jessica looked confused, glancing between Amanda and me with growing bewilderment. My mother continued serving sweet potatoes, apparently not having caught the significance of the moment. "Sarah Chen," Amanda repeated slowly, her voice carefully controlled. "The CEO of Tech Flow Solutions is named Sarah Chen." "That's right," my father confirmed, oblivious to the tension building around the table. "Remarkable young woman. Built the company from nothing in just 2 years. We researched her background extensively before taking on the account. MIT graduate, previously worked for some major consulting firms in Boston, before moving to Austin to start her own operation." Michael was the first to break the stunned silence. "Wait," he said, looking directly at me with dawning comprehension. "Sarah Chen, your name is Sarah Chen." "There are probably lots of Sarah Chens," Jessica said quickly, but her voice lacked conviction. She was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before, as if she were seeing a stranger wearing her sister's face. Amanda cleared her throat delicately, her professional composure intact despite what had to be significant personal shock. "I think," she said carefully, "there might be something we need to discuss." The weight of Amanda's words settled over the dining room like a heavy blanket, suffocating the cheerful holiday atmosphere that had filled the space just moments before. I could feel every pair of eyes at the table focusing on me with varying degrees of confusion, suspicion, and dawning understanding. The elaborate Thanksgiving spread that my mother had spent hours preparing suddenly seemed like props in a stage production that had taken an unexpected dramatic turn. My father leaned forward in his chair, his businessman's instincts fully engaged as he began connecting dots that had been scattered in front of him for months without forming a coherent picture. "Sarah," he said slowly, his voice carrying the measured tone he used when reviewing complex insurance policies. "Is there something you'd like to tell us?" The question hung in the air between accusation and invitation, giving me the opportunity to explain myself while making it clear that explanation was no longer optional. I glanced around the table, taking in each family member's expression and trying to calculate the best approach to a conversation I'd been dreading and avoiding for 2 years. Jessica sat frozen with her fork halfway to her mouth, sweet potatoes forgotten as she stared at me with an expression of complete bewilderment. "Sarah, what's going on? Why is Amanda looking at you like that? And why did Dad just describe someone with your exact name who runs a company?" "Because," Amanda said gently, her voice professional yet kind as she addressed Jessica while keeping her eyes on me, "I believe your sister and my CEO are the same person." The words landed like a bomb detonating in slow motion. I watched my family's faces transform as they processed Amanda's statement, confusion, giving way to shock, disbelief, and in my father's case, something that looked remarkably like pride mixed with hurt. My mother set down her serving spoon with a slight clatter against the ceramic dish. "I don't understand," she said, looking between Amanda and me with the expression of someone trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. "Sarah doesn't work for a technology company. She's been looking for work for the past 2 years. She lives in that small apartment downtown and drives that old Honda." "Actually," I said quietly, finding my voice for the first time since Amanda's revelation, "I do work for a technology company. I own." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, counting seconds that felt like hours as my family absorbed this information. Michael was the first to speak, his engineering student's logical mind apparently processing the data more quickly than the others. "You own Tech Flow Solutions?" he asked, his voice a mixture of amazement and confusion. "The company Dad's been talking about for months." The one he said was his biggest client success this year. I nodded, unable to find words adequate for the moment. The truth I'd been carefully concealing felt strange and unfamiliar spoken aloud in my family's dining room, as if admitting it here made it more real than all the board meetings and client presentations and strategic planning sessions I'd conducted over the past 2 years. "But why didn't you tell us?" Jessica's voice cracked slightly, and I could see tears beginning to form in her eyes. "Why would you let us think you were struggling? Why would you let me go on and on about my job and my boss when you were actually—" She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence, but I could see her mind working through the implication. Every conversation we'd had about her work, every time she'd offered to help me with job applications or networking, every family gathering where she'd been the success story while I'd been the cautionary tale about the importance of stable employment. "I can answer some of this," Amanda interjected diplomatically, clearly recognizing that the family needed context to understand the situation. "Sarah founded Tech Flow Solutions 18 months ago after developing a proprietary consulting methodology that's been incredibly successful in the market. The company has grown from 3 employees to 47, with clients across Texas and expanding into neighboring states." My father's expression had shifted from confusion to something approaching awe tinged with hurt. 47 employees, he repeated slowly. "Sarah, do you understand what that means in terms of business success? The revenue requirements, the operational complexity, the leadership skills necessary to manage that kind of growth." "I do understand," I replied, meeting his gaze directly for the first time since the revelation began. "It's been challenging, but also incredibly rewarding." "Then why?" my mother asked, her voice thick with emotion. "Have you been letting us worry about you? Why have you been coming to these dinners and letting us lecture you about finding direction in your life when you've already built something extraordinary?" The pain in her voice cut deeper than I'd expected. I'd been so focused on managing my own discomfort with my family's assumptions that I hadn't fully considered how my deception affected their emotional well-being. They'd been genuinely concerned about my future, losing sleep over my apparent lack of stability, when the reality was exactly the opposite. Elena Martinez, who had been sitting quietly throughout the exchange, suddenly laughed. Not mockingly, but with the kind of delighted surprise that comes from discovering something wonderful that was hidden in plain sight. "I knew there was something different about you," she said, shaking her head with amazement. "The way you carried yourself, the quality of your clothes even when they seemed casual. I told your mother last month that you had the confidence of someone who knew exactly where they were going." "You did notice," my mother said, turning to Elena with surprise. "I remember that conversation. You said Sarah seemed too composed for someone who was really struggling." "Because she wasn't struggling," Elena replied with a knowing smile. "She was managing a business and protecting herself by keeping it private. Very smart actually, though probably lonely." The loneliness observation hit closer to home than I cared to admit. Maintaining the deception had indeed been isolating, preventing me from sharing my victories and challenges with the people who mattered most to me. Every successful client presentation, every milestone the company achieved, every moment of pride in what we'd built had been experienced in a bubble separated from my family's support and celebration. "How did this happen?" Jessica asked, her initial shock giving way to genuine curiosity. "I mean, how did you go from being unemployed to running a company that Dad's bragging about to his golf buddies?" I took a deep breath, recognizing that the full story would require explaining decisions and circumstances I'd been keeping private for months. "I was never actually unemployed," I began, choosing my words carefully. "When I left my position at the consulting firm in Boston, I already had a business plan and seed funding from connections I'd made there." "Seed funding?" my father interrupted, his business instincts clearly engaged. "How much seed funding? What kind of connections?" "David," my mother warned gently, "let her tell the story." "It's okay, Mom," I said, appreciating her protective instinct, but recognizing that my father's questions came from genuine interest rather than skepticism. "I developed a client relationship management system while working in Boston that showed significant potential for broader application. When I decided to move back to Texas, I had 3 potential investors interested in funding the startup." Amanda nodded approvingly. "The CRM system is proprietary technology that's given TechFlow a significant competitive advantage in the market. Sarah's innovation in that area has been remarkable." Hearing Amanda describe my work to my family felt surreal, like watching 2 separate worlds of my life finally intersecting after being deliberately kept apart. Her professional assessment carried weight that my own explanations might not have, lending credibility to achievements that might otherwise have seemed too good to be true. "So when you moved to Austin," Michael said, working through the timeline, "you weren't job hunting. You were launching a business." "Exactly," I confirmed. "The first 6 months were spent setting up operations, hiring initial staff and developing our service offerings. We landed our first major client in month 7, and growth has been consistent since then." "Which brings us to an interesting coincidence," Amanda said with a slight smile. "Jessica's employer, Brand Forward Marketing, became one of our clients about 6 months ago. I've been managing that account personally, which means I've been working closely with Jessica while having no idea that my CEO's sister was the talented marketing coordinator I'd been mentoring." Jessica's face went through a series of expressions as she processed this information. "You've been getting reports about my work," she said slowly, looking at me with dawning understanding. "When Amanda tells you about the Brand Forward project, she's telling you about me. She's been telling me that we have an exceptional marketing coordinator on that account who shows real potential for strategic thinking and leadership development," I replied honestly. "I've been proud of your work without being able to tell you that." "This is extraordinary," Elena said, clearly delighted by the unfolding revelations. "Jessica, do you realize what this means? Your sister has been watching your career development through professional channels, seeing your talents recognized by people who have no reason to be biased in your favor." The validation seemed to hit Jessica powerfully. Throughout our adult lives, she'd sometimes questioned whether family praise for her achievements was genuine or simply familial loyalty. Learning that her professional abilities had impressed her sister's company without any family connection provided independent confirmation of her capabilities. "Wait," my father said suddenly, his expression shifting as another realization occurred to him. "If you own TechFlow Solutions, then you've been paying Meridian Insurance Group's commissions on your company's policies." You've been contributing to my business success while we've been worried about your financial stability. The irony wasn't lost on anyone at the table. For months, my father had been celebrating the TechFlow account as evidence of his company's growth and his own business acumen, never realizing that his supposedly struggling daughter was the client generating his enthusiasm. More than that, I admitted, recognizing that partial honesty would be more damaging than complete transparency. TechFlow has been recommending Meridian to other businesses in our network. You've gained at least 3 additional clients through our referrals. My father's expression went through several rapid changes as he calculated the financial implications of what I'd just revealed. 3 additional clients, he repeated. The Morrison Group, Henderson Technologies, and Riverside Manufacturing. All TechFlow referrals, I confirmed. Companies we've worked with who needed comprehensive insurance coverage. Sarah, my mother said softly, her voice filled with emotion I couldn't quite identify. You've been taking care of us without us knowing it. The observation caught me off guard, making me realize that on some level, supporting my father's business through referrals had been exactly that, an unconscious way of contributing to my family's success even while maintaining distance from their knowledge of my own achievement. I wasn't thinking of it that way, I said honestly. Meridian really is the best option for the types of businesses in our network. The referrals made sense professionally, but you could have worked with any insurance agency, Amanda pointed out gently. Choosing to work with your father's company, even without telling him, shows that family loyalty was influencing your business decisions. Michael laughed suddenly, a sound of pure amusement that cut through the emotional complexity of the moment. This is insane, he said, shaking his head with wonder. Dad's been bragging about his biggest client, Jessica's been bragging about her amazing boss, and neither of them knew they were both talking about Sarah. It gets better, Amanda said with a smile that suggested she was beginning to appreciate the humor in the situation. I live in the same building as Sarah. I've been running into her regularly for months, wondering why my CEO's apartment building seemed to have so many visitors who looked exactly like her. You live in Riverside Towers? Jessica asked with surprise, but that's one of the most expensive buildings down. Sarah, how have you been affording to live there if you've been unemployed? Before I could answer, my father held up his hand with the expression of someone whose business mind was rapidly recalculating everything he thought he knew. Jessica, if Sarah owns a company with 47 employees and clients across multiple states, she's not just employed, she's likely earning more than any of us. The weight of this realization settled over the table like a paradigm shift affecting everyone's understanding of family dynamics that had been operating under false assumptions for 2 years. I watched each family member process the implications of learning that the person they'd been worried about was actually the most financially successful among them. How much more? Michael asked with the directness that characterized his engineering perspective. I mean, ballpark. Are we talking comfortable living or serious money? Michael, my mother admonished, but her expression suggested she was equally curious about the answer. I hesitated. Recognizing that financial specifics would fundamentally alter family relationships in ways that might be difficult to manage. TechFlow has been very successful, I said carefully. More successful than I originally projected when I wrote the business plan. Sarah, my father said gently, his tone carrying the weight of professional experience with financial assessment. I've reviewed TechFlow's insurance applications and financial statements. I know what your company's annual revenue looks like. I'm asking why you chose to hide that level of success from your family. The directness of his question cut straight to the heart of motivations I hadn't fully examined myself. Why had I chosen deception over honesty? What had I been protecting myself from? And what had I been protecting them from? I think, I said slowly, working through thoughts I'd been avoiding for months. I was afraid that telling you would change everything between us. Our family has always had very clear ideas about success, about the right way to build a career, about the importance of stability and traditional markers of achievement. And you thought we'd disapprove of you building a successful company? My mother asked with genuine confusion. No, I replied, trying to articulate feelings that had seemed logical in isolation but sounded increasingly unreasonable when spoken aloud. I thought you'd approve too much. I thought everything would become about the business and the money and the success, and I'd lose the parts of our relationship that weren't about what I'd accomplished. Elena nodded with the understanding of someone who had observed family dynamics from the outside for years. You wanted to know that your family loved you for who you are, not what you'd achieved. But we do love you for who you are, Jessica said, her voice thick with emotion. Finding out you're successful doesn't change that. It just makes us proud and confused about why you felt like you had to hide it. Amanda cleared her throat diplomatically. If I may, she said, this kind of situation isn't uncommon among successful entrepreneurs, especially young ones. The pressure to manage family expectations while building a business can be overwhelming. Sometimes separation feels like the safest option. Is that what happened? My father asked, his business persona giving way to parental concern. Did you feel pressure from The question required honesty that felt risky but necessary. Not pressure exactly, I said carefully. But your definition of success has always been very specific. Traditional employment, steady advancement, recognizable career path. Starting a business, especially a technology business, didn't fit those parameters. Because we didn't understand it, my mother realized, her expression showing dawning comprehension. We kept asking when you were going to find a real job because we didn't recognize that you'd already created one. I should have explained, I admitted. I should have trusted you to understand and support what I was trying to build. Yes, my father said firmly, though his tone was more hurt than angry. You should have. We might not have understood the technical aspects, but we understand hard work and dedication, and building something valuable. Those principles translate across industry. Michael raised his hand like he was in class, a gesture that made everyone smile despite the emotional weight of the conversation. Can I ask a practical question? If Sarah owns a successful company, why is she still driving that beat-up Honda and living like she's broke? I'm not living like I'm broke, I protested, though I recognized his point. I've been reinvesting most of the profits back into the business to fund expansion, and the Honda is reliable. But you could afford a better car, Jessica pointed out. You could afford a house instead of an apartment. You could afford to take real vacations instead of always having to budget for everything. I could, I agreed. But building a sustainable business requires careful financial management, especially in the growth phase. Every dollar matters when you're trying to expand operations and hire new people. Amanda nodded approvingly. That's exactly the kind of long-term thinking that's made TechFlow so successful. Sarah's been incredibly disciplined about prioritizing business investment over personal spending. But now that we know, my mother said hopefully, you don't have to keep pretending anymore. You can just be yourself with us. The simplicity of her statement highlighted the complexity of what I'd created through 2 years of deception. Being myself with my family would require rebuilding relationships on entirely new foundations, acknowledging that the person they'd been worrying about was actually the person they could be proud of without reservation. It might take some adjustment, I admitted. For all of us, we've all been operating under assumptions that turned out to be completely wrong. Good assumptions or bad assumptions? Elena asked with a knowing smile, because from where I'm sitting, it looks like everyone gets to be pleasantly surprised. She was right. My father had gained a daughter who was successful beyond his expectations, rather than one who needed his guidance to find direction. My mother had gained a daughter whose future was secure, rather than uncertain. Jessica had gained a sister whose professional accomplishments validated her own career development. Michael had gained a sister who could serve as a role model for entrepreneurial thinking, rather than a cautionary tale about the importance of stable employment. I have questions, my father announced, his business instincts fully engaged now that the emotional revelations had been processed. Professional questions about TechFlow's operations, growth strategies, client development approaches, but those can wait until after dinner. Actually, Amanda said with a slight smile, I should probably mention that Sarah and I have a board meeting scheduled for Monday morning to discuss fourth quarter projections and next year's expansion plans, so you'll have plenty of opportunities to ask professional questions. The casual mention of our Monday meeting brought home the reality that Amanda and I would now have to navigate our professional relationship with full knowledge of my family connection. Her mentorship of Jessica would continue, but with the added complexity of knowing that her CEO was receiving reports about her own sister's development. Will this be weird? Jessica asked Amanda directly, clearly thinking along similar lines. Working with me when you know Sarah is my sister? I don't think so, Amanda replied thoughtfully. Your professional abilities speak for themselves, regardless of family connections. If anything, knowing that Sarah has been proud of your work from a distance makes me more confident in my assessment of your potential. Besides, I added, looking at Jessica with genuine warmth, you earned your position and your reputation completely independently. Finding out we're related doesn't change the quality of your work or Amanda's professional judgment. Michael stood up suddenly, raising his water glass in an impromptu toast. To Sarah, he announced, grinning widely, for being way more interesting than any of us realized. To Sarah, my father echoed, his voice carrying pride and lingering bewilderment, for building something remarkable while we were looking the other way. To family, my mother added softly, and to second chances to get things right. As we raised our glasses together, I felt a weight lifting that I hadn't fully realized I'd been carrying. The secret that had separated me from my family's full support and celebration was finally gone, replaced by the possibility of relationships built on complete honesty and mutual understanding. The turkey was getting cold, but nobody seemed to mind. We had more important things to discuss than holiday dinner logistics. For the first time in 2 years, I was looking forward to the questions rather than dreading them, ready to share my professional life with the people who mattered most to me personally. Amanda caught my eye across the table and smiled, an expression of professional respect mixed with personal warmth that suggested our working relationship might actually be strengthened, rather than complicated by this unexpected revelation. The boundary between my professional and personal lives had just collapsed entirely, but instead of the disaster I'd feared, it felt like freedom. The interrogation began immediately after we finished eating, though calling it an interrogation wasn't entirely fair, since the questions came from genuine curiosity rather than suspicion. My father had shifted into full business analysis mode, pulling out a legal pad from his study and taking notes as if he were conducting a formal interview rather than a family conversation. Start from the beginning, he said, pen poised over the paper with the same focused attention he brought to reviewing complex insurance policies. What gave you the idea for TechFlow Solutions, and how did you validate the market need? I settled back in my chair, recognizing that this conversation would require the same level of detail and strategic thinking I brought to investor presentation. The idea came from inefficiencies I observed while working in Boston, I began, appreciating that I could finally speak honestly about professional experiences I'd been vague about for months. Consulting firms were spending enormous amounts of time on client relationship management, using outdated systems that didn't integrate with modern data analytics. So you saw a gap in the market, my father noted, making annotations as I spoke. But seeing a gap and filling it profitably are two different things. How did you test the concept before committing resources? Amanda smiled at the familiar sound of business strategy discussion. Sarah spent 6 months conducting market research while still employed in Boston, she explained, clearly enjoying the opportunity to discuss my work with people who could appreciate its complexity. She interviewed over 200 potential clients across multiple industries to validate demand before writing her business plan. 200 interviews, my mother repeated with amazement. When did you have time for that while working full-time? Evenings, weekends, vacation days, I replied, remembering the exhausting but exhilarating period of laying groundwork for what would become TechFlow. I treated it like a second job because I knew the research phase would determine whether the business was viable. Jessica leaned forward with growing interest. Is that why you were always on your laptop when you came home for visits? We thought you were job hunting, but you were actually building a business plan. Exactly, I confirmed, feeling oddly relieved to finally explain behavior that had probably seemed antisocial at the time. Every family gathering was also an opportunity to work on market analysis or financial projection, which explains why you always seemed distracted, Elena observed with the perceptiveness that had made her suspect something was different about my situation. You weren't avoiding family time because you were depressed about unemployment. You were managing a complex project that required constant attention. Michael shook his head with wonder. And we kept trying to cheer you up and give you pep talks about job searching when you were actually working harder than any of us. The irony hadn't escaped me at the time, though I'd chosen to endure well-meaning career advice rather than explain what I was actually doing. Looking back, I could see how my secretiveness had created a cycle where my family's concern increased as my distraction grew, leading to more advice and more pressure to share details I wasn't ready to reveal. "Let's talk numbers," my father continued, his business instincts overriding social niceties. "What was your initial capital requirement, and how did you structure the funding?" I glanced at Amanda, who nodded encouraging. These were details I could share with family now that the basic truth was established. "Initial capital requirement was $400,000, I said, watching my father's eyebrows rise significantly. "I secured $200,000 from personal savings and early investor commitments, with the remaining $200,000 structured as a line of credit against projected first-year revenue." "Personal savings of $200,000, my mother said slowly. "Sarah, where did you get that kind of money?" "Combination of salary savings from Boston, some profitable investment decisions, and a signing bonus from my previous employer that I never spent," I explained, living below my means for several years while building investment capital. My father made several notes, clearly calculating the financial discipline required to accumulate that level of startup funding. "And the early investors, professional connections from Boston." "Two former colleagues who had started their own consulting practices and understood the market opportunity," I confirmed, "plus one client who was frustrated enough with existing solutions to invest in developing something better." "Smart diversification," he noted approvingly. "Industry expertise combined with client validation. That suggests you understood both the technical requirements and market demand." Amanda nodded. Sarah's investor selection was strategic beyond just funding. Each investor brought specific expertise that helped accelerate business development in areas where she needed support. "What areas?" Jessica asked, her marketing background clearly engaged by the business development discussion. "Legal structure, accounting systems, and client acquisition strategy," I replied. Having investors who had successfully built service businesses meant I could avoid common startup mistakes while focusing on product development and market entry. Alina raised her hand with a question that made everyone smile. "In plain English, for those of us who don't speak business, what does TechFlow actually do?" "I understand it's technology consulting, but what does that mean in practice?" I appreciated the question because it forced me to explain our work in terms anyone could understand. "We help businesses use technology more effectively to save time and money," I said simply. "For example, a manufacturing company might have 3 different computer systems that don't communicate with each other, requiring employees to enter the same information multiple times. We design solutions that connect those systems and eliminate the redundant work." "So you make businesses more efficient," my mother summarized. "Exactly, more efficient, more profitable, and better able to serve their customers," I confirmed. "The technology part is important, but the real value is understanding how businesses operate and finding ways to improve their processes." Michael nodded with the understanding of someone who worked with complex systems. "You're essentially industrial engineering applied to information technology." "That's a good way to think about it," Amanda agreed. Sarah's background combines technical skills with business analysis, which is why TechFlow's solutions are so effective. "We don't just install software, we redesign workflows to optimize performance." My father continued his note-taking, clearly building a comprehensive picture of TechFlow's operations. "Client acquisition strategy," he said, returning to his systematic approach. "How do you identify and develop new business relationships?" "Combination of referrals, industry networking, and targeted outreach to businesses showing signs of operational inefficiency," I replied, settling into the familiar rhythm of explaining our business development approach. "Amanda manages most of our client relationship development now, but initially I was handling all sales activities personally, which is how the brand-forward relationship developed," Amanda added, glancing at Jessica with a smile. "Sarah identified them as a potential client, but I took over the account management once we established the working relationship." "So you've been watching my work through Amanda's reports," Jessica said, her understanding of the situation continuing to evolve. "When she tells you about project successes or challenges, she's actually giving you updates about your sister's professional development." "It's been one of the best parts of those reports," I admitted honestly. Getting objective feedback about your capabilities and growth from someone who has no reason to be anything other than completely honest about your performance. What has Amanda been telling you? Jessica asked, curiosity clearly overcoming any embarrassment about having her work discussed. Amanda smiled warmly, that you have exceptional strategic thinking abilities, that you understand client needs intuitively, and that you show real leadership potential. I've been recommending Sarah consider you for advancement opportunities within our broader client network. The pride on Jessica's face was unmistakable, and I realized how valuable this independent validation must be for her. Throughout our adult lives, she'd sometimes wondered whether family praise reflected genuine assessment, or simply familial loyalty. Learning that her professional abilities had impressed people who had no personal connection to her provided confirmation that her career success was entirely merited. Advancement opportunities, my father repeated, his business instincts focusing on practical implications. Are you saying that TechFlow might offer Jessica a position? We've discussed it internally, Amanda replied, glancing at me for confirmation. Jessica's skills would transfer well to our client relations team, and her marketing background would be valuable for business development activity. But that's complicated now, Jessica pointed out, clearly thinking through the implications. How can I work for my sister's company? Wouldn't that create conflicts of interest or favoritism concern? Not necessarily, I said, having considered this possibility before tonight's revelations made it a practical question. TechFlow has clear policies about professional qualifications and performance standards. Family relationships don't override merit-based evaluation. Plus, Amanda added, Jessica would be reporting to me, not directly to Sarah. The organizational structure would maintain professional boundaries while allowing family members to work for the same company. Michael laughed suddenly. So Jessica could end up working for Sarah's company, managed by Sarah's employee, while Dad's business ensures Sarah's operations. This family is going to be completely professionally interconnected. The observation highlighted how dramatically the evening's revelations had changed our family dynamics. Instead of being the unemployed sister who needed support and guidance, I had become the central figure in a web of professional relationships that connected everyone's career success. Speaking of professional interconnection, Elena said with obvious amusement, I have to ask about the apartment building situation. Amanda, you said you live in the same building as Sarah. How awkward has that been? Amanda laughed, clearly finding humor in the situation now that it made sense. Incredibly awkward, she admitted. I kept running into someone who looked exactly like my CEO in the lobby and elevators, but she always seemed to be visiting friends or running errands. I started wondering if I was losing my mind or if there were just a lot of people in Austin who looked remarkably similar. What did you think when you saw me tonight? I asked, curious about her perspective on the revelation. Initially, confusion, she replied honest, then recognition, then trying to process how my client relations director's CEO could possibly be the sister who Jessica always described as unemployed and struggling to find direction. And now? Jessica asked. Now it all makes perfect sense, Amanda said with a smile. The confidence I noticed when we encountered each other in the building, the quality of the apartment when I glimpsed it through the open door, the way Sarah carried herself even when she was supposedly job hunting, all the pieces that didn't fit the story now fit perfectly. My mother reached across the table to squeeze my hand. I'm still processing all of this, she said softly. Part of me is incredibly proud of what you've accomplished, and part of me is hurt that you felt like you couldn't share it with us. I understand both reactions, I replied, appreciating her honesty about the emotional complexity of the situation. I made choices based on fears that probably weren't rational, and those choices affected all of you in ways I didn't fully consider. What kinds of fear? My father asked, his question carrying genuine curiosity rather than judgment. I took a moment to organize thoughts I'd been avoiding examining too closely. Fear that success would change our relationships in ways I couldn't control, I said slowly. Fear that family dynamics would become about money and business instead of personal connections. Fear that I'd lose the parts of our relationship that weren't about what I'd accomplished professionally. But we're still the same people, Michael pointed out. Finding out you're successful doesn't change who we are or how we feel about you as a person. I know that now, I acknowledged, but building a business is isolating, especially in the early stages when you're working constantly and everything feels uncertain.
It was easier to compartmentalize family relationships than to risk complicating them with business pressures. Elena nodded with understanding. You were protecting yourself and protecting them, she observed, keeping business success separate from family relationships until you were confident the success was sustainable. Exactly, I confirmed, grateful for her insight. I wanted to be sure TechFlow was going to survive and thrive before introducing that complexity into family dynamics. And now you're confident it will survive and thrive? My father asked. I'm confident we've built something sustainable and valuable, I replied. The client base is solid, the team is strong, and the market opportunity continues to expand. TechFlow has moved beyond the vulnerable startup phase into established business territory. Amanda nodded emphatically. The company's growth trajectory has been remarkable, and the client retention rate is exceptionally high. Sarah's strategic vision combined with operational excellence has created a business model that's both profitable and scalable, which brings us to the future, my father said, his note-taking continuing as he outlined next steps. What are TechFlow's expansion plans, and how do those plans affect family considerations? Expansion into neighboring states over the next 18 months, I replied, appreciating that I could finally discuss business strategy with family members who understood commercial development. We're evaluating opportunities in Oklahoma, Louisiana, and New Mexico, with potential partnerships in Colorado and Arizona. Regional expansion requires significant capital investment, my father observed. Are you planning additional funding rounds, or do you have sufficient cash flow to self-fund growth? Combination of both, I said, impressed by his immediate understanding of expansion challenges. Current cash flow can support measured growth, but accelerated expansion would require additional investment capital. Have you considered strategic partnerships with established firms in target markets? Amanda asked, clearly thinking through implementation strategy that could reduce capital requirements while providing local market expertise. We've had preliminary discussions with potential partners in Dallas and Oklahoma City, I confirmed. The challenge is finding firms whose operational standards and client service approaches align with TechFlow's standards. Jessica had been listening to this business strategy discussion with growing fascination. This is incredible, she said suddenly. Sarah, you're not just running a successful business, you're building something that could become a major regional company. That's the goal, I acknowledged, feeling a flush of pride at being able to share ambitious plans with family members who could appreciate their scope and complexity. And you've been doing all of this while we've been worrying about whether you could find an entry-level job somewhere, my mother said, shaking her head with amazement and lingering disbelief.
The contrast highlighted just how completely my deception had distorted family perceptions. While they'd been concerned about my basic employment prospects, I'd been building something that could potentially employ hundreds of people across multiple states. I think, Elena said thoughtfully, this calls for a different kind of celebration than we originally planned. We're not just celebrating Thanksgiving. We're celebrating Sarah's business success and the family's reunion with complete honesty. Agreed, my father said, closing his legal pad with the satisfaction of someone who had gathered comprehensive information about an interesting business opportunity. Though I reserve the right to ask more detailed questions about operational procedures and financial management strategies, I'd welcome those questions, I replied honestly. It will be nice to have family input on business decisions, especially from someone with your commercial experience. Does this mean family dinners are going to become business strategy sessions? Michael asked with mock concern. Only if Sarah wants them to be, my mother said firmly. Business success is wonderful, but family time should still be family time, unless Sarah chooses to mix them. Actually, I said, considering possibilities I hadn't allowed myself to explore while maintaining the deception, I think some mixing might be healthy. TechFlow's success affects all of us now, directly and indirectly. Having family input on major decisions could be valuable. As long as you remember that family support isn't contingent on business performance, Amanda said diplomatically. The conversation continued late into the evening, morphing from shocked revelations into detailed business discussions that felt both natural and surreal. My father had retrieved his laptop from his study and was showing Amanda and me the insurance portfolio TechFlow had purchased, pointing out coverage details he'd specifically recommended based on what he'd observed about our operational risks. The irony of reviewing my own company's insurance policies while sitting at my childhood dining table wasn't lost on anyone. You were remarkably conservative in your liability coverage selections, my father noted, scrolling through the policy documents on his screen. Most technology startups underestimate their exposure in the early growth phases, but your risk assessment was surprisingly sophisticated. Because Sarah consulted with 3 different insurance professionals before making those decisions, Amanda explained, glancing at me with professional respect. She spent weeks researching industry-specific risks and coverage options before our first meeting with your office, which explains why our initial consultation was so productive, my father realized, his expression shifting as he connected dots he'd missed during our original business meetings. You asked remarkably informed questions for a young CEO. I assumed you had an excellent business advisor. I did, I replied with a slight smile. I'd been listening to your insurance expertise my entire life, even when I didn't realize I was learning. The acknowledgement seemed to touch my father deep. Throughout my childhood, he'd occasionally tried to explain insurance concepts during family conversations, treating them as educational opportunities rather than boring adult topics. I'd absorbed more of those lessons than either of us had realized, and applying that knowledge to protect my own business felt like a natural extension of his guidance. That's actually quite touching, Elena observed, clearly moved by the generational connection. David, your professional expertise has been supporting Sarah's business success even before you knew she had a business. Michael laughed, breaking the emotional moment with characteristic humor. So basically, everything Dad taught Sarah about risk management and business protection has been protecting all of us indirectly, since TechFlow's success affects the whole family now. Speaking of family connections, Jessica said, her voice carrying a note of hesitation that suggested she was about to raise a sensitive topic. I need to ask something that's been bothering me since we started talking about all this. She paused, gathering her thoughts before continuing. Sarah, if you've been watching my work through Amanda's reports, and if TechFlow has been so successful, why didn't you ever offer me a job directly? Why did you let me work for a client company instead of bringing me into your own organization? The question cut straight to a decision I'd been wrestling with privately for months. Watching Jessica excel at brand forward while knowing I could offer her better opportunities and advancement prospects at TechFlow had created an internal conflict between my desire to support her career and my commitment to maintaining professional boundaries. Because I wanted your success to be entirely your own, I replied honestly, recognizing that the explanation might sound insufficient given the circumstances. If I'd hired you directly, there would always be questions about whether your advancement was based on merit or family connection. But aren't there questions about that anyway now? Jessica pressed. I mean, now that everyone knows you're my sister, won't people assume any future success I have is because of family favoritism? Amanda leaned forward, clearly having considered this dilemma from her position as both my employee and Jessica's supervisor. Actually, the opposite might be true, she said thoughtfully. Working with you for 6 months without knowing about your family connection means I can provide completely objective assessment of your capabilities. No one can question whether my evaluation of your performance was influenced by knowing you were the CEO's sister. That's an excellent point, my father noted, his legal background clearly appreciating the value of unbiased professional assessment. Jessica's track record speaks for itself, established independently of any family influence. Plus, I added, building on Amanda's observation, if you decide to join TechFlow in the future, you'll be coming from a position of proven success rather than as someone who needed family help to find employment. That's a much stronger foundation for career development. Jessica considered this perspective, her expression shifting from concern to understanding. So by not hiring me immediately, you were actually protecting my professional reputation and ensuring that any future opportunities would be based on demonstrated ability. Exactly, I confirmed. I wanted you to have the chance to prove yourself independently before family connections became part of your career narrative. Though now that those connections are public knowledge, Amanda said with a smile, we might want to revisit the conversation about opportunities within TechFlow's broader client network. What kind of opportunity? My mother asked, her parental interest clearly engaged by the possibility of Jessica's career advancement. Several of our clients have expressed interest in hiring marketing professionals with Jessica's skill set, Amanda explained. Companies that are larger than brand forward and could offer more diverse project experience and faster advancement track. Or, I said carefully, recognizing that this was the moment to address possibilities I'd been considering privately, there might be opportunities within TechFlow itself as we expand into new markets. We're going to need experienced marketing professionals to support business development in target cities. The suggestion hung in the air as Jessica processed what I was offering. Not a job handed to her because of family connections, but a career opportunity she'd earned through demonstrated professional excellence that happened to be available at her sister's company. I'd want to earn any position, Jessica said firmly. No special treatment, no family discounts on expectations or performance standards. I wouldn't offer it any other way, I replied, appreciating her insistence on maintaining professional integrity. TechFlow's success depends on hiring the best people available regardless of personal relationships. Though having family members who understand the company's culture and values can be an advantage, Amanda added diplomatically. As long as professional standards remain the primary consideration. My father had been taking notes throughout this exchange, clearly analyzing the family employment dynamics from a business perspective. This is actually quite common in successful family businesses, he observed. The key is establishing clear policies about performance expectations and advancement criteria that apply equally to all employees. Does that mean you'd consider joining TechFlow yourself? Michael asked with obvious amusement. We could have a complete family business operation going here. I think I'll stick to providing insurance coverage, my father replied with a laugh, but I appreciate the theoretical possibility. Elena raised her hand with another practical question. What about the immediate situation? You've all been keeping this secret for months, but now it's out in the open. How do you handle the transition from deception to honesty with other people who don't know the truth yet? The question highlighted a challenge I hadn't fully considered. Extended family members, family friends, and professional contacts who had been operating under false assumptions about my employment status would need to be informed about the actual situation. The process of correcting 2 years' worth of misconceptions would require careful handling to avoid creating additional complications. I hadn't thought about that, my mother admitted. Sarah, we've been telling people you were job hunting and struggling to find your direction. Your Aunt Margaret has been praying for you to find employment, and your grandmother has been worried sick about your future. Oh no, Jessica said, clearly realizing the scope of the situation. I've been updating college friends about your job search whenever they ask about family news. I've probably told dozens of people that you're having trouble finding work. The unintended consequences of my deception were becoming apparent as we discussed them. Well-meaning family members had been sharing information that painted a completely inaccurate picture of my circumstances, potentially affecting how extended networks viewed both me and my family's ability to support their children's career development. We'll need a communication strategy, Amanda suggested, her marketing background clearly engaged by the challenge of managing information flow, something that explains the situation honestly without making people feel embarrassed about previous conversations or assumptions. What would you recommend? I asked, recognizing that Amanda's professional perspective on communication management would be valuable for handling this delicate situation. Start with immediate family and close friends, she replied, outlining her approach systematically. Provide a clear, simple explanation that focuses on your business success rather than the reasons for previous secrecy. Let them share the good news naturally rather than treating it like a correction that needs to be made. So we frame it as exciting news about Sarah's success rather than an admission that we've all been wrong about her situation. Jessica summarized. Exactly, Amanda confirmed. People love sharing positive updates about family members. Turning this into a celebration rather than a clarification makes the transition much easier for everyone involved. My father nodded approvingly. That's excellent, strategic thinking. Focus on the achievement rather than the miscommunication, and let people draw their own conclusions about why the information wasn't shared earlier. I'll start with my book club, my mother said, clearly already planning her approach to sharing the news. They've been asking about you for months, and they'll be thrilled to hear about TechFlow's success, And I'll update my college friends through social media, Jessica added. A post celebrating my sister's business achievement will reach everyone efficiently without requiring individual explanations. Michael grinned widely. I'm definitely telling my engineering professor. They've been giving me career advice based on the assumption that my family doesn't understand technology businesses. Finding out my sister runs a successful tech consulting firm is going to blow their mind. The enthusiasm with which my family was embracing the opportunity to share positive news about my accomplishments felt both gratifying and overwhelming. For 2 years I'd avoided their well-meaning attempts to help with my supposed job search. Now they were eager to celebrate achievements they'd never known existed. There's one more thing we should discuss, Elena said, her expression suggesting she was about to raise another practical consideration. Sarah, you've been living below your means and keeping a low profile while building your business. Now that the family knows about TechFlow's success, are you planning to make any changes to your lifestyle? The question addressed something I'd been considering since starting the company but had avoided acting on while maintaining my deception. Living modestly had been partly financial strategy and partly camouflage, allowing me to reinvest profits into business growth while avoiding questions about sudden lifestyle improvements. Some changes probably make sense now, I admitted, thinking through possibilities I'd been postponing. A more reliable car, definitely. Maybe a house instead of an apartment, though I like the downtown location for commuting to the office. What about vacations? My mother asked hopefully. You haven't taken a real vacation in years, always claiming you couldn't afford to travel or take time off from job searching. I haven't taken vacations because I've been working constantly, I replied with a laugh. But now that TechFlow has management systems in place and Amanda is handling client relations, I probably could take some actual time off. We should plan a family trip, Jessica suggested with growing excitement. Somewhere nice that we've never been able to afford before. A real celebration of Sarah's success and our family's new understanding of each other. The idea of a family vacation funded by TechFlow's success felt both appealing and strange. Throughout my adult life, family trips had been carefully budgeted affairs, with everyone contributing according to their financial capacity. Being able to afford a more luxurious vacation for the entire family represented a fundamental shift in family dynamics that would require adjustment for everyone. I'd like that, I said honest, though we should probably start with something modest while everyone adjusts to the new financial reality. What about that ski trip to Colorado you and Jessica always wanted to take? Michael suggested. Dad's been saying for years that we'd do it someday when everyone could afford it. I could definitely afford it now, I acknowledged, feeling a flutter of excitement about possibilities I'd been denying myself, and it would be a good way to celebrate together without making the trip about money rather than family time. My father leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful as he processed the evening's revelations and their implications for our family's future. This has been quite an evening, he said finally. I feel like I need to apologize for not recognizing what you were building. The signs were there, but I was so focused on traditional career markers that I missed what was actually happening. We all missed it, my mother added gently, because Sarah was protecting herself and protecting us from complications we might not have handled well at the time. And because I wasn't ready to risk changing our relationships before I was confident the business would succeed, I admitted. Building TechFlow required complete focus and commitment. Adding family dynamics to that pressure might have been overwhelming. But now you're ready, Jessica asked, hopefully. Now I'm ready, I confirmed, feeling the truth of that statement as I spoke it. TechFlow is stable enough to handle the complexity of mixing family relationships with business operations, and I'm confident enough in what we've built to share it openly. Amanda smiled warmly. I think this transition is going to be positive for everyone involved. Sarah's been carrying the weight of managing professional success privately, which has been isolating. Having family support for business challenges will probably improve her leadership effectiveness, and will finally understand what she's dealing with professionally, my father added. Instead of worrying about her future, we can actually provide relevant advice and support for the challenges she's facing. Alina stood up and began clearing dessert plates, signaling that our extended conversation was beginning to wind down. I have to say, she announced, this has been the most interesting Thanksgiving dinner I've ever attended. Usually family gatherings involve updating each other on known situations. Tonight, we've completely rewritten the family narrative. In a good way, I hope, I said, helping her stack dishes while reflecting on how dramatically the evening had exceeded my expectations. In the best possible way, she replied firmly. You've given your family the gift of being able to be genuinely proud of your accomplishments instead of worried about your future. That's remarkable. As we moved into the kitchen to handle cleanup duties, the conversation naturally fragmented into smaller groups. My father and Amanda were discussing insurance industry trends and how they might affect TechFlow's expansion plan. Jessica and Michael were speculating about family vacation possibilities and comparing notes about how to update their respective social circles about my business success. My mother and I found ourselves alone at the kitchen sink, washing dishes in the comfortable silence that had always characterized our most meaningful conversation. She handed me plates to dry while organizing her thoughts, a familiar pattern from countless childhood moments when important topics were addressed through the routine of shared domestic tasks. I'm proud of you, she said quietly, her voice carrying emotions that hadn't been fully expressed during the larger group conversation. Not just because TechFlow is successful, but because of how you handled building it. The discipline, the strategic thinking, the commitment to doing things right, even when it meant sacrificing immediate gratification. Thank you, I replied, accepting both the praise and the deeper understanding it represented. That means more to me than you probably realize. And I'm sorry that we created an environment where you felt like you couldn't share what you were doing, she continued, her tone carrying genuine regret. I've been thinking about our conversations over the past 2 years, and I can see now how our questions and assumptions probably felt like pressure rather than support. The acknowledgement touched something deep that I hadn't expected to address during the evening's revelation. It wasn't intentional pressure, I said carefully. But yes, sometimes it felt like I had to choose between honesty and maintaining peace in our relationship. That was never our intention, she assured me, though her expression suggested she was processing the unintended consequences of their concern. We thought we were being supportive by showing interest in your career development. You were being supportive, I acknowledged. It just wasn't the kind of support I needed at the time. I needed space to build something without having to explain or justify every decision along the way. She nodded thoughtfully, accepting my perspective without defensiveness. And now I think I need the opposite, I replied honestly. I've been isolated with business challenges for too long. Having family input and support for major decisions could be incredibly valuable. We're here for that, she promised. Whatever you need, whatever TechFlow needs, we want to help however we can. The sincerity in her voice, combined with the evening's earlier conversations, created a sense of possibility I hadn't allowed myself to imagine. Instead of relationships built on careful management of information and expectations, we could have connections based on complete honesty and mutual support. From the dining room, I could hear Amanda explaining TechFlow's client development process to my father, who was asking detailed questions about market penetration strategies and competitive position. Jessica was telling Michael about specific projects she'd worked on, finally able to share professional accomplishments with someone who could appreciate their complexity. The sound of my family engaging enthusiastically with my professional world, after 2 years of carefully avoiding the topic, felt like a fundamental shift in our collective dynamic. Instead of being the person they worried about, I had become someone whose work they could understand and celebrate. One more question, my mother said, as we finished the dishes. Are you happy with TechFlow, with the life you've built, with the choices you've made? The question required a moment of genuine self-reflection. Building TechFlow had been incredibly demanding, requiring sacrifices and compromises that had sometimes felt overwhelming, but it had also been deeply fulfilling in ways that traditional employment never could have been. I'm happier than I've ever been professionally, I replied honestly. Building something from nothing, seeing it succeed, knowing that our work makes a real difference for our clients, there's no feeling quite like that. And personally, she pressed gently, personally has been more complicated, I admit. The secrecy was isolating, and building a business doesn't leave much time for relationships outside work, but tonight feels like the beginning of something better. Like I can finally have both professional fulfillment
and authentic family connection. She smiled warmly, drying her hands on the dish towel with the satisfied air of someone whose concerns had been resolved. Then this evening has been exactly what it needed to be. As we rejoined the others in the living room, I found them deep in conversation about TechFlow's expansion timeline and the potential impact on Austin's technology sector. Amanda was explaining our hiring projections while my father took notes about the implications for local employment growth. "Sarah," Jessica called out as I settled back into my chair, "Amanda was just telling us about TechFlow's community involvement initiatives. I had no idea you were supporting local STEM education programs." "It's part of our corporate responsibility strategy," I explained, though I was pleased that Amanda had mentioned our community engagement efforts. "We provide technology consulting services to nonprofit organizations at reduced rates, and we sponsor coding workshops for high school students." "Which explains why Sarah is always busy on weekends," Amanda added with a knowing smile. "She volunteers personally at the coding workshops, not just through corporate sponsorship." Michael's eyes lit up with obvious admiration. "That's incredible. You're not just running a successful business, you're giving back to the community and helping develop the next generation of technology professionals." The pride in his voice reminded me of why I'd wanted my family to know about TechFlow's success, not just because of the financial achievements, but because of the broader impact we were having on our industry and community. "Actually," I said, realizing that complete honesty included sharing future plans I'd been developing privately, "I've been considering expanding our community involvement significantly as TechFlow grows." "What kind of expansion?" my father asked, his business instincts clearly engaged by the mention of strategic planning. "Technology incubator for high school entrepreneurs," I replied, outlining ideas I'd been researching for months. "Providing workspace, mentorship, and seed funding for students who want to start their own businesses while still in school." The room fell silent as everyone processed the scope and ambition of what I was proposing. A technology incubator represented not just community service, but a significant business investment that could have substantial long-term impact on Austin's entrepreneurial ecosystem. "That's extraordinary," Elena said finally, her voice filled with admiration. "Sarah, you're talking about creating opportunities for entire generations of young entrepreneurs." "It's still in the early planning stages," I cautioned, though I appreciated their enthusiasm. "But TechFlow's success has given us the resources to consider projects that could have broader social impact." "And you've been developing these plans while we thought you were struggling to find basic employment," Jessica said, shaking her head with continued amazement at the evening's revelation. "I've had a lot of time to think about what I wanted to do with success if I achieved it," I replied with a slight smile. "Turns out I wanted to create opportunities for other people to build something meaningful too." The conversation continued until nearly midnight, covering everything from TechFlow's operational procedures to family vacation planning to community development strategy. By the time Amanda finally left and my parents began showing signs of exhaustion, we had covered 2 years' worth of suppressed conversations in a single evening. As I drove home to my downtown apartment, my phone buzzed with text messages from various family members. Michael sent a picture of our family group chat with the title changed to TechFlow Family Network. Jessica shared a draft social media post celebrating my business success. My father forwarded an article about technology sector growth in Austin with a note saying it reminded him of TechFlow's expansion plans. The immediate embrace of my professional identity by people who had been worried about my future felt both validating and overwhelming. After maintaining careful separation between my family relationships and business success, the sudden integration of both felt like learning to navigate familiar territory with completely different maps. But as I pulled into my building's parking garage and rode the elevator to my floor, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 2 years: complete honesty about who I was and what I'd built. No more careful editing of conversations, no more deflecting questions about my work, no more managing different versions of my identity for different audiences. TechFlow Solutions would continue growing and expanding, but now that growth would happen with the full support and understanding of the people who mattered most to me personally, and that felt like the most significant business achievement of all. The following Monday morning brought an entirely new dimension to my professional life as I prepared for TechFlow's weekly board meeting with the knowledge that Amanda would now be navigating our working relationship with full awareness of my family connection. I arrived at the office early, using the quiet time before the business day officially began to review quarterly reports and strategic planning documents that would guide our expansion discussion. TechFlow's headquarters occupied 2 floors of a renovated warehouse in Austin's emerging technology district, with open workspace concepts designed to encourage collaboration while providing private areas for client meetings and strategic planning sessions. The exposed brick walls and polished concrete floors created an atmosphere that balanced professional sophistication with creative energy, reflecting the company culture I'd worked to establish since our founding. Amanda arrived precisely at her usual time, carrying her morning coffee and wearing the focused expression that characterized her approach to important meetings. Our greeting was professionally warm but carried an undercurrent of adjustment as we both navigated the reality that our family dinner conversation had fundamentally altered our working dynamic. "How was the rest of your weekend?" she asked as we settled into my office to review the morning's agenda.
I imagine your family had more questions after I left. Extensive questions, I confirmed with a slight smile. My father spent most of Sunday researching technology consulting industry trends and taking notes about TechFlow's competitive positioning. I think he's more excited about our business model than I realized was possible. That level of family engagement could be incredibly valuable for strategic planning. Amanda observed, her marketing background clearly appreciating the potential benefits of having invested family members who understood business operations, especially as we move into expansion phases that will require significant decision-making support. Robert Kim, our Chief Financial Officer, joined us at exactly 8:30, carrying the detailed financial analysis that would anchor our quarterly review discussion. Robert had been with TechFlow since our 6th month of operation, bringing the kind of financial expertise and strategic thinking that had enabled our rapid but sustainable growth. "Morning, Sarah." "Amanda," he greeted us, settling into his chair with the easy confidence that came from knowing his financial projections were meticulously prepared and thoroughly documented. "I have to say, this quarter's numbers exceeded even our optimistic projections." "How significant?" I asked, though Amanda's reports had already given me preliminary indications of our strong performance. Revenue growth of 37% over the previous quarter, with client retention at 96% and profit margins increasing due to operational efficiencies. Robert replied, consulting his detailed spreadsheet. "Most importantly, cash flow projections support aggressive expansion without requiring additional external funding." The financial strength Robert described represented more than business success. It validated every strategic decision we'd made since TechFlow's founding and confirmed that our growth trajectory was sustainable rather than artificially inflated. Amanda nodded approvingly as she reviewed the detailed breakdowns, clearly pleased with results that reflected both her client management excellence and our broader operational effectiveness. "Client feedback analysis supports the financial data," Amanda added, opening her own portfolio of quarterly assessments. Satisfaction ratings remain consistently high, with several clients requesting expanded service arrangements for next year. The Brand Forward project that Jessica worked on has generated 3 additional referrals from companies impressed with our strategic approach, including 2 potential clients that could represent significant revenue growth, I noted, having reviewed Amanda's preliminary assessments of the referral opportunities. Which brings us to the expansion timeline discussion. Robert pulled up his financial modeling software on his laptop, displaying projections that mapped various expansion scenarios against resource requirements and anticipated return on investment. Based on current performance trends, we could support entry into 2 additional markets within the next 6 months without straining operational capacity. Dallas and San Antonio remain our primary targets, Amanda confirmed, consulting her market research documentation. Both cities have strong business communities with demonstrated demand for technology consulting services, and we have preliminary partnership discussions underway with local firms. The strategic planning session continued for 2 hours, covering everything from hiring projections, to client development strategies, to operational systems that would support multi-city service delivery. Throughout the discussion, I found myself thinking about how dramatically my perspective on business growth had shifted since revealing TechFlow's success to my family. Previously, expansion planning had felt like a private challenge requiring careful resource management and risk assessment, conducted in isolation from external input. Now, with the knowledge that my family understood and supported what we were building, growth strategies felt less daunting and more exciting, as if we had additional stakeholders invested in our success. There's one more item I'd like to discuss, I said as we concluded our formal agenda review: the community involvement, expansion, and its implications for resource allocation. Both Robert and Amanda looked interested, though Robert's expression carried the cautious attention of someone responsible for ensuring that community initiatives didn't compromise financial stability. I had discussed our current community programs with both of them previously, but the technology incubator concept represented a significant escalation of our social impact commitment. I've been developing plans for a technology incubator focused on high school entrepreneurs, I explained, opening the proposal I'd been refining for several months, providing workspace, mentorship, and seed funding for students interested in starting businesses while still in school. Amanda leaned forward with obvious enthusiasm, her marketing instincts clearly recognizing the potential benefits of such a program for TechFlow's community profile and long-term talent development. That's an incredible concept, Sarah. Not just for community impact, but for establishing TechFlow as a leader in entrepreneurial education. What kind of resource commitment are we considering? Robert asked, his financial perspective focusing immediately on practical implementation requirements: workspace, staffing, funding amounts, program duration. Initial proposal involves dedicating 1,500 square feet of office space, 2 full-time staff members for program coordination, and seed funding pool of $50,000 annually, I replied, having researched comparable programs to establish realistic resource requirements. Robert made quick calculations on his laptop, running the numbers against our projected cash flow and operational budgets. Financially feasible, he concluded after several minutes of analysis. The workspace dedication would require reconfiguring our office layout, but we have sufficient staffing costs, fit within hiring projections, and the funding pool represents manageable impact on annual profits. Beyond the immediate financial considerations, Amanda added, this kind of program could have substantial long-term benefits for TechFlow's reputation and talent pipeline. Students who participate successfully could become future employees or business partners. The strategic value she identified aligned with my own thinking about the incubator's potential impact. Austin's technology sector was experiencing rapid growth, creating demand for skilled professionals that often exceeded local supply. Developing entrepreneurial talent at the high school level could contribute to the broader ecosystem, while positioning TechFlow as an industry leader in educational innovation. I'd like to move forward with detailed planning, I decided, feeling confident that we had sufficient resources and strategic justification for the program. Amanda, would you be willing to lead the development process? Your client relations experience would be valuable for designing mentorship components. Absolutely, she replied with genuine enthusiasm. I think this could become a signature program that distinguishes TechFlow from other consulting firms in our market. As our meeting concluded and we transitioned into the regular business day, I felt a sense of momentum that extended beyond typical quarterly planning sessions. TechFlow's financial strength, expansion opportunities, and community impact potential created possibilities I hadn't allowed myself to fully envision during the company's more vulnerable early phase. The morning brought a steady stream of client calls, project planning meetings, and operational decisions that comprised the daily reality of running a rapidly growing business. But throughout these routine activities, I found myself appreciating how much more sustainable the work felt now that I could share both challenges and successes with family members who understood business operations. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text from Jessica asking if I wanted to join her for lunch to continue our conversation from Thanksgiving evening. The invitation represented exactly the kind of normal sibling interaction that had been complicated by my secrecy for the past 2 years, and I welcomed the opportunity to rebuild our relationship on honest foundation. We met at a coffee shop near Jessica's office, settling into a corner booth that provided privacy for conversations that might cover sensitive professional topics. Jessica looked more relaxed than she had during Thursday's revelations, as if she'd had time to process the situation and organize her thoughts about its implications. I've been thinking about everything you told us, she began without preamble, diving directly into substantive discussion with characteristic directness. About TechFlow, about your reasons for keeping it secret, about the opportunities you mentioned for my career development. And what conclusions have you reached? I asked, curious about her perspective after several days of reflection. That I understand why you made the choices you did, even though they hurt initially, she replied thoughtfully. Building a business while managing family expectations would have been incredibly complicated, especially with Dad's tendency to offer unsolicited advice about everything. I laughed, recognizing the accuracy of her observation about our father's well-intentioned but sometimes overwhelming guidance approach. That was definitely a consideration. I needed space to make mistakes and learn from them without having to explain every decision to people who might not understand the industry dynamics. But I also think, Jessica continued, that keeping the secret cost you more than you probably realized at the time. You've been carrying all the stress and pressure of building TechFlow alone without family support when you needed it most. Her insight touched on something I'd been avoiding examining too closely. The isolation that came with maintaining professional secrecy had indeed been more emotionally taxing than I'd acknowledged, even to myself. You're right, I admitted. There were definitely times when I could have used family support for major decisions, or just emotional encouragement during difficult periods. So moving forward, she said, leaning across the table with obvious investment in the conversation's direction, how do we build something better? How do we have honest family relationships that include your professional success, without making everything about business? The question reflected exactly the kind of thoughtful consideration that made me confident Jessica would excel in any career environment she chose. Rather than focusing on immediate opportunities or personal benefits, she was thinking strategically about sustainable family dynamics that could support everyone's long-term happiness. I think it starts with clear boundaries, I replied, having considered this challenge extensively since Thursday evening. TechFlow is important to me, but it's not the only thing that defines me or our relation. We need to be able to have conversations about business when it's relevant, but also maintain space for personal connections that aren't about professional achievements. Like today, Jessica observed with a smile, having lunch together because we're sisters, not because we're discussing career opportunities or business strategies. Exactly, though the fact that we can now discuss career opportunities and business strategies honestly when it's appropriate is also important, I acknowledge. The key is balance rather than complete separation or complete integration. Jessica nodded thoughtfully. Speaking of career opportunities, I do want to explore possibilities with TechFlow, but I want to approach it correctly. What's the appropriate process for someone who's interested in joining the company? Her question demonstrated the professional maturity that had impressed Amanda throughout their working relationship. Rather than assuming family connections would create a shortcut to employment, Jessica was asking about proper procedures that would ensure any hiring decision was based on merit rather than personal relationship. Start by submitting a formal application through our standard hiring process, I replied, appreciating her commitment to maintaining professional standards. Amanda handles initial candidate screening, so she'll review your qualifications objectively. If your skills match our needs, you'll go through the same interview process as any other candidate. And if I'm hired, what kind of reporting structure would avoid conflicts of interest? She asked, clearly having thought through potential complications. You'd report directly to Amanda, not to me, I explained, outlining the organizational approach we'd discussed during our board meeting, that maintains professional boundaries while allowing family members to work for the same company. Amanda's assessment of your performance would be independent of any personal relationship I might have with your work. That seems like a reasonable approach, Jessica agreed. I want any success I have at TechFlow to be based on my contributions to the company's goals, not on family favoritism. The conversation continued for another hour, covering everything from specific TechFlow positions that might match Jessica's skill set, to broader family communication strategies that would support everyone's professional development. By the time we parted ways, we had established frameworks for navigating the intersection of family relationships and business opportunities that felt both practical and sustainable. Returning to the office, I found Amanda coordinating with our operations team about workspace modifications that would accommodate the proposed technology incubator program. Her enthusiasm for the project was evident in the detailed planning documents she'd already begun developing, outlining everything from student application processes to mentorship structures to success metrics for evaluating program effectiveness. I've been researching similar programs nationally, she reported, showing me comparative analysis of technology incubators at other consulting firms and educational institutions. Our concept has some unique advantages, particularly the combination of professional business environment with peer collaboration opportunities. What kind of timeline are you projecting for program launch? I asked, reviewing her preliminary implementation schedule. If we begin facility modifications next month, we could pilot the program with our first cohort of student entrepreneurs by early spring, Amanda replied, consulting her detailed project timeline. That would allow us to refine our approach based on initial results before expanding to full capacity. The rapid progress Amanda had made on incubator planning reflected both her professional efficiency and her genuine excitement about the program's potential impact. Watching her develop strategic frameworks for supporting young entrepreneurs reminded me of why I'd promoted her to client relations director. Her ability to translate abstract concepts into practical implementation plans that achieved meaningful results. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.